My experience as a regulator, I found out that governments don't have enough, let us say, respect for the independence of a regulator. The governments appoint the regulator, and they think that the regulator must sort of relate to them. And this, in case of energy regulation, particularly nuclear, is extremely a big mistake. A regulator should be like a judge, fully independent. What has happened in Japan in Fukushima is that decision-making was done by a lot of people, the last of which was the manager of the power station. TEPCO was taking decisions, the prime minister was taking decisions, the government was taking decisions, and they were transmitting it to the power station manager. And in the end, the power station manager decided, for the first time, I understand, in Japan, to take his own decisions. He wanted to cool the power station by water from the sea. And this was, again, the regulations. But his knowledge dictated to him the right decision. And he took the right decisions and implemented it. As far as I can understand the Japanese culture, this is the first time in which a manager does not abide by the decisions of the government. He took the right professional decisions. I myself, in my youth, run many power stations, many utilities, and it's usually the manager of the utility. And the manager of the power station is the most knowledgeable person about what's happening. And he should be given the independence to make decisions. And the regulator role is to ensure that the decisions are being done by the right people, not by the prime minister or the government. So independence of regulators is essential. You can't have a worldwide regulation because each country has got its own situation. But worldwide, there should be a recognition of the independence of the regulator. It's like a judge. It shouldn't report to the prime minister or to the government. It can report, for instance, to the parliament, but it should be like justice, fully independent. Thank you.
Mr. Okhita, the same first question. I will speak in French and English. Monsieur Okhita, la même première question que j'ai posée. I will speak then in English. I will speak in English then. Quel est votre point de vue également sur donc ce que je disais tout à l'heure sur le travail, enfin sur l'organisation de la Nuclear Safety Commission qui chapeaute notamment la Nuclear and Industrial Safety Agency, donc l'agence de sûreté japonaise. Did the Nuclear Safety Commission and the Nuclear and Industrial Safety Agency did the good have a good organization and did the best job during the before the Fukushima before Fukushima? I will repeat. What is your point of view about the organization and the organization of the Nuclear Safety Commission of Japan before Fukushima and during Fukushima catastrophe?
So it's a difficult question for the answer. So everyone understands that regulation and so promotion is completely different. So nuclear agency and the nuclear safety agency, there are two agencies, and it belongs to the cabinet. One is cabinet, and one is so they are both are.
Sorry.
Both belong to the cabinet, but so promotion agency is how to say rather belong to the Ministry of Environmental, Ministry of Economic, Trade, Industry. So it's a different position Nuclear Commission and Nuclear Safety Commission. And also there another is so the agencies belong to the METI. So there are 3 agencies in Japan to control their nuclear policy. It's a most serious problem in Japan, and such thing is regulation is how to say just so I think that safety culture problem is not only in the industry side, but also the regulatory side. So the Nuclear Safety Commission is how to say. So I mentioned that they how to say they know, they predict the accident, such kind of rare event. In this case, it's a rare event. It's a low frequency but high serious consequence case. It's called a rare event. And so everyone knows such rare event would be occur, but the safety agency, it's okay. We should consider seriously once more. We will decide in near future such kind of safety culture problem was exist in the Nuclear Safety Commission, and after the so Nuclear Safety Commission cannot do anything in the during the accident. It's not their role, but they should do something. And after the accident, that agency would move to the environmental Ministry of Environmental Affairs. So, but the root problem is not solved. Just move from the cabinet to the environmental Ministry of Environmental Affairs.
Thank you. So my 2 last questions, mes 2 dernières questions. Alors ma première question, je vais la poser donc à Madame Kruger et à Monsieur McLingoff. My first question is for both of you. Donc comment vous voyez concrètement dans les prochaines années le mix énergétique et quelle est votre vision du potentiel réel de développement des énergies renouvelables?
What we see at the moment is a silent revolution. There is an enormous uptake of renewable energy, and our belief is that the phase out of nuclear of some of the leading countries like Germany is leading to major companies like Siemens also dropping nuclear and really investing in renewables. So we're going to see the development of renewable to really speed up in the next years. We will do our utmost to make sure that in Germany the phase out of nuclear will not mean that there is an uptake of more fossil fuels. But there is a huge potential, and they are really grabbing it now. And for nuclear, a lot of those projects will probably fall on not being able to be financed because of if it is in a free market, the banks will not take the risk if there is not governments that are saying we will take the risk for you. So we see that very, very few of the projects that are now in the papers will actually really be built of nuclear. Therefore, a lot more renewable will be built. And we will make sure that as little as possible fossil fuels will lock in our future in carbon dioxide emissions.
Thank you. Mr. McLingoff, you want to...
Yeah, I don't want to go into all those your arguments, Mrs. Krüger. We can do it over lunch or so. Just about the German situation. I guess there's no question that in Germany all companies, also the nuclear operators, want at some time rely on renewables without nuclear. That was consent before. It was only the question of timing. Also, of course, my company has a lot of renewable generation. It has one of the biggest windmills in the US, wind farms, and others. And this was only a question of timing, I must say. We had a phase out all the time to certain dates. And now there was a sudden decision taken to do it very fast. And I must say this might succeed, but it might not also. This is very risky. And so without any strings about or any way out of it, it was not said, okay, if in 2 years we see this is other things, this doesn't work, we do another decision. It was just decided. And this is a very risky decision. So I think Germany will survive anyway. We have a strong economy, so we can afford a lot of nonsense we are doing. We can afford a lot of money we throw away. So the economy has some advantages compared to other countries. So we will survive. I'm not sure that what Ms. Krüger said, that's the so-called Energiewende, which we call the energy, I don't know the English word for this, a fast switch in energy will not lead to a higher emission of CO2. We see it at the moment. We do emit a lot of more. We import a lot of. So it's quite natural, and we try the utmost to install other capacity. But our politicians is asking every investor, why don't build you a gas power plant? Because I know it's the only way to do it in the short run. So, but no investor at the moment is saying, okay, I will do it because they are unsure how secure any investment is in Germany at the moment. So if there's any new investment in Germany, it will be gas. We will have higher greenhouse emissions. Nobody talks about greenhouse emissions at the moment. It was 1 year ago, everything was about CO2, but then it was Fukushima. Nobody talks about CO2, so everybody's happy with gas and import and so on. So it's just the public conception. To sum it up, it's a risky decision to do it in this time scale. It might work out, but probably it's not very probable.
Thank you. Avant ma dernière question qui sera destinée à Saïd Mouline, j'ai juste une petite remarque, une question à Madame Krüger, parce que vous parlez du fort potentiel, bien évidemment, des énergies renouvelables. Est-ce qu'à Greenpeace, vous ne pensez pas également à certaines problématiques, notamment d'émissions de CO2 et de gaz à effet de serre qui sont liées aux industries des énergies renouvelables, notamment de l'industrie photovoltaïque, par exemple, pour la production des panneaux, l'industrie éolienne, aux problématiques, par exemple, de transformation de champs agricoles en champs solaires, problématiques de visuel avec les éoliennes, même si aujourd'hui on développe de l'éolien offshore. Quel est le point de vue, votre point de vue, le point de vue de Greenpeace sur ces différentes questions liées également, à la protection de l'environnement et au développement des énergies renouvelables? I will speak. You prefer that I repeat my.
We have a very comprehensive vision of how we see that energy transition, and we're taking into account the whole chain of energy and the whole production line also, and look at like how long does it take for solar panels to be sort of reproducing the energy that it takes. And we're very aware, and that is one of the drivers for us saying you should be speeding up the phase out of nuclear, because you make the space for investments for renewable energy. As for the landscape, one of my colleagues said, if we would be against nuclear power plants because they're ugly, people would laugh us out of the room. But of course, you have to make sure that you have regulation in place that enable as much participation from the people, so that you have the acceptance of the people of the different energy sources. It is very much a choice that we together need to make in order to live happily on our planet in the future. So we can't be just forcing on one or the other energy source onto people.
So my last question, ma dernière question, et on ouvre ensuite, on a quelques minutes parce qu'on a démarré un peu en retard. My last question, and then we open. Monsieur Mouline, Saïd Mouline, donc vous êtes le directeur général de l'ADERE. Donc moi ma question c'est comment vous voyez l'avenir du mix énergétique marocain. Il y a le plan solaire marocain de 2000 MW, il y a le programme éolien. Comment vous voyez concrètement la réalisation de ces programmes et l'avenir du mix énergétique marocain?
Je crois que depuis 2009, la stratégie était très claire dans le domaine de notre orientation énergétique pour les 10 prochaines années en tout cas. On a un programme de 2000 MW solaire, 2000 MW éolien et atteindre les 2000 MW hydrauliques. Nous sommes déjà à 1700. Nous sommes aujourd'hui à 2 gigawatts installés renouvelables entre l'éolien et l'hydraulique. Nous aurons 6 gigawatts en 2020. C'est lancé, c'est un programme qui est déjà en marche. Donc 42% de la capacité électrique du royaume sera d'origine renouvelable, la capacité, en 2020. Ça, c'est décidé. Qu'est-ce qui va se passer ensuite? Est-ce que la vision ensuite, c'est-à-dire qu'on aura aussi d'autres centrales au charbon, nous sommes en train de vivre une transition énergétique. On ne va pas arrêter du jour au lendemain tout ce qui est énergie fossile. On l'a vu dans les chiffres de l'Agence internationale de l'énergie, il y aura un rôle pour toutes les énergies encore pour 20, 30, les 50 prochaines années. Il est clair que les renouvelables ont une croissance énorme dans le monde. Aujourd'hui, ils partent de petits, ils partent pas surtout les nouvelles technologies, pas l'hydraulique, mais l'éolien, le solaire, la biomasse, on n'en a pas parlé, mais aussi il y a des filières qui se développent. Ces filières vont encore plus se développer et aujourd'hui on voit malgré la crise où vont le financement. Quand j'ai dit tout à l'heure 210 milliards de dollars investis dans le monde, c'est énorme dans le renouvelable. Au Maroc, nous avons attiré pour le plan solaire des financements très intéressants que nous n'aurons pas pour une centrale au charbon ou pour une centrale à gaz naturel. Il est clair qu'aujourd'hui, avec ce mixte, dans les 20-30 prochaines années, il y aura une part pour le renouvelable de plus en plus importante. Ça, c'est en parlant que des projets nationaux. Nous avons entendu parler des projets régionaux, où demain, le Maroc pourra exporter une partie d'énergie verte vers l'Europe. Le projet Desertec commence à se mettre en place. Le plan solaire méditerranéen prévoit certaines actions pour des centrales solaires au sud de la Méditerranée qui produiraient de l'énergie pour le sud, mais aussi pour le nord, pour réduire les émissions de carbone au nord et au sud, pour aussi développer le Sud avec une nouvelle approche, et c'est là où je dirais, nous sommes dans une discussion sur la gouvernance mondiale. J'espère qu'avec les renouvelables, à la différence de ce qui s'est passé avec les énergies fossiles, surtout entre le Nord et le Sud, nous aurons une nouvelle approche créatrice d'emplois au Nord et au Sud, avec des réductions de CO2 au Nord et au Sud. Et je crois que nous sommes dans un schéma où tout le monde est gagnant avec ces filières. On a parlé beaucoup de nucléaire, les réserves prouvées, et c'est dommage que le responsable de l'Agence internationale de l'énergie ait quitté, les réserves prouvées d'uranium aujourd'hui. Pour combien d'années on parle d'uranium prouvé? C'est-à-dire on parle de 70 ans, 80 ans. Donc on est dans une limite de temps, et c'est pour ça que nous pensons que ce siècle, au Maroc comme ailleurs, ce siècle verra un changement dans le domaine d'énergie, et que les renouvelables vont jouer un rôle de plus en plus important. Elles le font déjà, la croissance est énorme. Nous avons un programme très ambitieux pour un pays du Sud, qui, je vous rappelle, émet 10 fois moins de CO2. Un Marocain émet 10 fois moins de CO2 qu'un Européen. Donc nous faisons un effort énorme, nous avons des financements, et nous espérons que l'accompagnement avec un petit peu les recommandations qui peuvent ressortir de ces Med-Days, c'est de dire oui, il faut encore accompagner encore plus au Sud par des financements pour que les pays du Sud jouent pleinement cette nouvelle carte énergétique où tout le monde peut être gagnant. Voilà. Merci.
Information, le docteur Al-Khatib est actuellement en direct avec 2M. Il nous rejoindra juste après son interview. Mr. Khatib has an interview with the Moroccan TV live. He will come back just after. So we apologize. And second information, deuxième information, pour votre information, nous avons remis l'Institut Amadeus hier, à l'occasion de la cérémonie d'ouverture du Forum MedDays, le prix MedDays de l'environnement et de développement durable à la Corée du Sud pour sa stratégie de développement de l'industrie des énergies renouvelables qui a été lancée depuis 2008. Donc bien évidemment, on espère que le Maroc réussira à lancer également sa stratégie de développement de l'industrie. On ne parle pas uniquement de développement de parcs éoliens océans, mais de l'industrie des énergies renouvelables. Donc maintenant, on va ouvrir à la salle les questions-réponses. Alors, ce que je vous propose, c'est qu'on fait 2 questions à gauche, 2 questions à droite. Alors pour la première à gauche, le monsieur qui est deuxième. Là, pouvez-vous, s'il vous plaît, vous présenter avant de poser votre question? Can you present yourself before to ask the question? Thank you.
My name is Naveed Ahmad. I am a speaker here, but I'm from Pakistan at the moment. My question is that the topic was that Fukuyama, the paradigm, has survived or has elapsed. And while discussing that, we quickly and easily switched to renewable energies without debating the topic. The concern after Fukuyama is that there are so many power plants installed in the 70s or later which are wearing out, which are in countries which cannot afford to maintain and do not get the kind of support or have insecurities sharing the problems they are facing in maintaining their nuclear power plants. And these countries somehow are also the ones which are disaster prone. Take the example of Pakistan, Karachi. There was a massive earthquake. Nothing happened, luckily, but there's a big Canadian power plant which has problems, but Pakistan will not share it. And there are other examples. Maybe in East Asia you can find the same in Argentina and Brazil. So this is a question that probably I think more important to avert something that has happened in Japan, because the immediate problems are that you can have excellent renewable energy solutions, but the problem is that a country has invested billions of dollars in establishing one plant, and you can simply not just do away with it and switch to renewables. And maintenance then becomes a major headache, and there is no support because of political, economic, or technical reasons.
Thank you. Who wants to answer the question? Thank you.
Yeah, I totally agree. That was my concern also for years before Fukushima, because I'm from Germany and I know that not all countries have the same standards. So, but what Fukushima has one lesson learned out of it. First thing is we need international cooperation. This is one thing which is also taken up by the International Atomic Energy Commission, and they have to look at all those countries in special where those problems might be there. So this is the only thing we can do at the moment, international cooperation, and help those countries in keeping up their standards and improving their plans. On the other hand, what Fukushima is just very personal for me, showed me is, because I was always thinking everything is done to prevent an accident. So, and if an accident happens, it is a national catastrophe. So we must do everything to prevent an accident. So what has shown by Fukushima is that even this plant, which is very old, was also a very old one, which is not really up to all the standards we have now. And an accident happens, and the decisions during the accident management period were not always very prudent. They still managed to keep it limited. So this is something which I was astonished, I must say. I wouldn't expect it. So I would think, in particular, if you have reactors in smaller countries, smaller reactors, which are easier to handle after an accident, with much heat production. So you can, if you have a trained staff in accident management, you can also do a lot of things. So 2 things: accident management. Second thing, international cooperation.
On va prendre 3 questions par 3 questions. Alors, de ce côté, on prend 2. Alors, le monsieur qui est derrière.
Thank you. William Pace with the Institute for Global Policy. I think Ms. Kruger was the only one that mentioned one aspect that my organization would like to emphasize, and that is that the other side of the coin of nuclear energy is nuclear weapons. And the danger of nuclear proliferation has been raised at all in this discussion, except in those panelists who mentioned that you need to add to the cost of nuclear energy the cost of accidents, or I would also say the cost of dealing with the waste, which also didn't get dealt with very much in this panel. And as far as I can tell, in 60 years, 70 years, we haven't figured out how to deal with nuclear waste. And the last point is the point Mr. Mecklenoff made, which you're talking about your government looking at a 10,000-year window of safety instead of a 100-year window or a 50-year window or whatever. But in terms of management, who can even think about ensuring management and superb management for 100 or 200 years, much less 10,000 years? And the last point is that as we phase out of this energy form, who is going to pay for the thousands of years of protecting what is left over, or even hundreds of years? So to me, there's a whole range of considerations on nuclear that did not get addressed that do need to be taken into consideration in the context of this question. Thank you.
Before the answers, I want to precise that both the 2 questions were very essential. I wanted to give us de vous libérer la parole very quickly. So, second question here, please.
Monsieur Ujita, pardon. Madame El Adawi, je suis membre du Conseil national des droits de l'homme. Je suis présidente d'une cour régionale des camps à Rabat. Monsieur Ujita a mis l'accent sur la nécessité d'élaborer, d'instaurer des critères de sécurité nucléaire standardisés. C'est une très bonne chose, encore qu'elle soit accompagnée en amont par un dispositif qui permet de s'assurer que les gestionnaires du nucléaire ont saisi, ont compris, ont maîtrisé ces normes, que ces gestionnaires connaissent et leurs droits et leurs obligations. Premier élément. Deuxième élément, il faut que ces gestionnaires soient accountable. Ils rendent compte de cette gestion et ils le font dans la sincérité et dans la transparence pour s'assumer en tant que responsable. En amont, il faudrait qu'il y ait un dispositif d'évaluation, évaluation objective, neutre, loin de tout intérêt économique, de toute instrumentalisation politique. Je crois qu'avec ce triptyque, on aura une gestion des risques du nucléaire très performante et parallèlement, on aura des institutions de régulation et d'évaluation crédibles et objectives. Et merci.
Alors, troisième question. Alors, on va donner...
Moi, Matt Lajouti, je travaille dans un cabinet d'avocats, Sunusi Law Firm. I will speak French, so my English is not perfect. Voilà, je salue la participation déjà de la représentante de Greenpeace et je salue aussi la partie de tous les autres intervenants, mais seulement parce que Greenpeace et ses combats ont inspiré toute une partie de mon adolescence. C'est pourquoi. Donc, pour l'autorité en la matière, c'est-à-dire en matière d'énergie nucléaire, c'est-à-dire l'Agence internationale d'énergie nucléaire, je crois qu'elle a besoin d'indépendance, de beaucoup d'indépendance, et je rejoins l'intervention de Monsieur Hicham Khatib qui n'est pas là, et ce serait l'occasion pour donner la question à Madame Grucker. J'espère qu'elle ne pas. Voilà, c'est qu'est-ce qu'il faut faire pour encourager les efforts de l'indépendance de cette agence, surtout qu'il faut les pousser vers au profit des pays émergents et ne pas réserver cette énergie à l'élite des pays. Ma deuxième question à M. Moulin, qui est le directeur de l'Agence de développement des énergies renouvelables, et surtout